I think there is an inherent sense of optimism. And I think optimism in leadership is a very powerful thing. Nobody finally wants to be led by someone who's unhappy, who's complaining, who's bitter about the world. I've always believed in the power of dreams, that if you want it enough, to mil jayega. And the fact that a girl who thought that an Ivy League college was just a dream can stand here receiving an alumni award is a proof of the power of dreams. My issues are also a little unique because it's a combination of gender and age. I was 33 when I started, right? So I was a very young CEO. People don't see a mutual fund CEO at 33. So they don't, and even that I think is going to change now. They don't know what to make of it. A young girl, mutual fund CEO at 33 who's not come from industry, people don't know what to do with it.
Thanks, Radhika, for doing this interview with us. A very special thanks to you for giving us time, because you're like the epitome of wiping out the norm, which is what our series stands for. And let me start by asking you that you had a very different childhood because your father was a diplomat, he was in IFS. You've moved to places. So how was it that your childhood has influenced the kind of personality that you have today?
So I think I had a very unique childhood. As you said, my father has moved countries every 3 years, and sometimes, a lot of people have had parents with transferable jobs, but what's unique about the foreign service is that you move to very drastically different cultures, because you could be living in Europe for 3 years and then suddenly be posted to the Middle East or Africa. So you're really growing up in very different cultures. At that point, man, this makes me sound very old, social media was not as prevalent as it is today. So you didn't have a concept of school friends, right? Because you couldn't keep in touch with people. So I think the impacts are very deep. I think one, and the most meaningful impact is it makes you very agile. It makes you very comfortable with change. Because, as a child, you've seen change every 3 years. There's no permanent notion of my school, my house, my friends, all these things that children grow up with. I mean, I don't have school friends actually, because I didn't, grow up long enough in one place. So I think that is very powerful, and is probably very relevant also in today's time when things in any industry, including mine, are changing so quickly. So the ability to accept change, I talk about this in my book also, get up, adapt, move on quickly, I think is the biggest gift. And I think the second is, moving to countries like these gives you a sense of optimism, because they are not perfect places. In fact, many of them are far from perfect, and circumstances are also so different. And I think it makes you see the opportunity in everything that you have. So my parents always said that, you can't control the country that the government posts you to, but you can control the experience you have there. And you can try to maximize that experience. And so I think there is an inherent sense of optimism. And I think optimism in leadership is a very powerful thing. Nobody finally wants to be led by someone who's unhappy, who's complaining, who's bitter about the world. And I think actually in India and in Indian leadership, optimism plays a very powerful role.
So you derive that optimism from your days at childhood?
I do. I derive it from my parents, who are perennially optimistic. And, from my childhood, I mean, I derive it from the fact that, my father says living in Islamabad was one of the best postings of his life, that living in Nigeria was the most fun he's had. I mean, nobody's, optically, nobody thinks these countries are fun. But that's where the inherent sense of optimism came from.
It's in our hands to make happiness.
It's in our hands to make it.
That's true. But tell me, how did these cultures teach you the kind of values that you hold today and give it to your team? For example, like you said, you have also stayed in countries like New York and Nigeria, which are totally apart from each other. So how have you taken the goods from each one of them?
So I think one is, I think that this is a very agile team. A few weeks ago, those who follow personal finance and the mutual fund industry would know that there was a very large tax change, related to fixed income mutual funds, and we are a very large player in that space. But our team is very agile. So the minute it happened, there was no sense of anger or depression. Rather, there was a sense of optimism, and we are bubbling with ideas, we're bubbling with opportunities. In fact, when most people expect us to be depressed about the change that has happened, people are optimistic. This is a chance to recreate, to naturally disrupt. So I think that is there. I think the other learning from my childhood in many of these countries is that there are things that are core to you. I remember growing up in Italy, where I did my high school, and Italians, I think, cherish their history and what is their core very, very closely. Their love for the arts, their love for the history. I remember at that time, their love for coffee, actually. And I remember at that time, while Starbucks was sort of a phenomena all over the world, at that time there was no Starbucks in Italy. It was the local cappuccino, and that was what was core. So I think this belief of sticking to what is core for you and standing for something is also something that we are trying to build, because our industry has 45 players and it's very easy to be a clone of someone else. But I truly believe brands are built by standing for something, and standing for something means making choices. And I think that's something that we're trying to build.
And making bold choices, because that's when you get to stand out.
So you stand out, when you stand up for something, and that is powerful. Another thing I have learned, I lived in New York in the US for 12, 13 odd years. And I think one of the greatest things about the city of New York, which is where I spent 8 years, is the tremendous amount of resilience. I had just moved to the US when 9/11 happened. And of course, there's mourning for the incident, but there's also a sense of rebuilding in the fact that the city never sleeps. So I think resilience in business is such an important quality. Over the last 5-6 years, this team has also gone through so much. 2018, 19 weren't the easiest years, but the ability to get yourself back and pick up is so important. So I mean, these are just a few of the cultural influences, that I've picked up, and there's so many more.
Right. And do you think that had you not experienced all these countries and their cultures, the person you are today had been a little bit different, or you would have still adapted these kind of leadership qualities along the way?
I don't know. It's hard to speak in hindsight, but I think it's a very unique cultural upbringing. In fact, I regret that I don't have that background, so it's very likely my husband and I will build our careers in India, and our son will grow up in India, which is also wonderful. But he won't have the upbringing that I did. There was a lot less money, and there was a lot less privilege, but just the constant sense of chaos and different cultures is something that I feel very fortunate to have experienced.
Right. And sometimes, like you said, chaos also leads to confusion in some state or the other. How did you decide that this is the path that you want to choose for your career and take step by step into that field?
I was having a conversation with someone in my HR team, and I said, most people's careers are some combination of chance and choice, and of course a lot of hard work. I mean, at least, and I think the generation that is 20 years younger than me is a lot more clear about what they want to do, because they grew up in a very different kind of India. We grew up in the Indias of the 80s and 90s, where, to be honest, private sector careers were just about beginning to be launched. Now, my dad is someone who was a diplomat. He worked in the public sector, so there was no real exposure to corporate India. So I didn't grow up with the influences that, but okay, I want to join this company or that company. In fact, I remember when I graduated from college and I was discussing with my parents tech or finance, they were like, both are really well paying, private sector jobs. So that was the only lens we had. And so I have become an asset management professional a little bit by chance, right? I joined a consulting firm, decided, okay, I want to move into an operating business, joined a hedge fund, seemed to like it, moved back to India, continued this journey, went from institutional to retail. So it's, in some sense, been a combination of taking the opportunities that were presented to me and making the most out of them, and the fact that I think financial services as a career one of the great things about the markets profession is it has many different layers.
Yeah.
Markets are not boring. They don't let you sleep. There's always, if you're not making money every day, which nobody really is, I truly believe there's something to learn every day from the markets profession. So I think that's one thing that's kept me in the business. The second is, thankfully, the business hasn't let me get bored, because I've done US hedge funds, I've done institutional, I've done a startup, I've built a business within a larger corporate house like Edelweiss AMC from ground up. Even within this, I've had the opportunity to partner with government, I'm working with global institutions, I'm working with retail customers.
Right.
So this business has so many different layers that I think it still keeps me going.
Yeah, that's so interesting. But looking back 10 to 20 years, how was it when you started off your college at Wharton? Because how did you make that choice, firstly, that you would want to be somebody who's graduated from an Ivy League, or that also happened by chance?
So I think, the choice to graduate from an Ivy League is obviously not something you can plan. Now, again, because I lived abroad, there was, I think my mother and I were having this conversation when I was in 10th, that perhaps going back to India after 12th, having grown up abroad for so many years, would be a little tricky. And I was always a good student. So I think one of the great things is both my mother and father, especially my mother, were very ambitious for me. And, they wanted me to push the bar. And so I think that really helps. And then we started having conversations about going overseas. Now, the interesting thing is, and I see a lot of these comments on social media when people assume I have a foreign service background. They assume we grew up with a lot of wealth, which is actually not true. Children of government officers, we have nice homes, etc. And we get to travel the world, but we don't grow up with a lot of wealth. So affording a US education was a problem. So I was one of those financial aid candidates. But we applied. We applied to schools, and we applied to an Ivy League school like Wharton as well. And we applied to many other schools. And I think I was fortunate enough that I could craft the right story and also had the academics to be able to get through. In fact, I recently went back to campus to receive an alumni award. And what I said in my speech was that, I've always believed in the power of dreams, that if you want it enough, to mil jayega. And the fact that a girl who thought that an Ivy League college was just a dream can stand here receiving an alumni award is a proof of the power of dreams. So that's actually what I said in my address.
Do you also believe in the power of visualization? And is this something that you had visualized for yourself when you were studying?
I believe in the power of dreams. I sometimes don't know if we can visualize. So I think there is a broad visualization, there is an ambition, there is a wish that, I want to study at one of the best institutions in the world. But is it Wharton? Nobody knows. Like there was a wish to head a large institution, to run a company. But did you know at 20 that you'd be sitting in India being the CEO of a mutual fund? No idea. So I don't think I have the ability to visualize that far. Even today, people come to me and say, 15 years here later, we see you here, we see you in this position. And I don't visualize it that way. I think of the fact that, yes, 15 years later, I want to be in a role that makes a lot of impact. But what it exactly is, I don't know. Because I do believe we live in a dynamic world. And choices will be dynamic and things will change. So there's a broad visualization, but it's not a very firm visualization.
You spoke of impact. What was your definition of impact back then when you were studying, and what is it now?
Actually, I didn't particularly care about it. I mean, it's a great question. I didn't particularly care about impact in my 20s. I mean, I'm being very honest. And I think for every individual, the definition of success, personal success, changes over time, and it should. So in my early 20s, the definition of success to me was making reasonable money, being financially independent, given the background that I come from, working in a role that taught me something, getting promoted in office, just the basic things like working for a good brand. I mean, then you don't think of more than that, or at least I didn't think of more than that in my 20s. And I think my needs were very basic, that I'd make some money, I'd work for a good brand, I'd be learning something, that's all that mattered.
Yeah.
I think over time, things like success with clients, started mattering. I think now for me, impact is the ability to influence people. So, and people could be, thankfully in my role, I touch a wide variety of people. It could be employees, it could be hiring someone and helping them achieve their best potential. To me, that is impact. It could be making impact on customers, because finally we are a customer business. So it could be, when a little bit after Bharat launched, and when customers write emails to us that, this is a product that's made impact on me, that's impact. And it could be through your work making an impact on young men and women, or men and women of all ages, with the work you do, with the stories you share. So I think that is impact. Impact is affecting people's life in some way.
Yeah, and I'm sure your book is one of them. The modes through which you want to create an impact as well.
It's just one more attempt at sharing stories, and hopefully they are impactful.
Yeah, right. And let me also take a step back, and I read it in so many of your stories out there, which is today, that people used to bully you for the features you had, or for various other reasons. Was it more prominent in India or outside India when you were amongst other foreign nationals?
So actually, I haven't lived in India very long, and I don't believe India is more judgmental. In fact, my mother, who's been an educator, says India is a little more socially kind on this front than other parts. It was actually much tougher overseas. One, because at that point, India wasn't the India of today. Like in the 90s, being an Indian wasn't the coolest thing, right? I mean, you still would get asked questions about, do you go to school on elephants overseas? So the brand of India has changed substantially in the last 20 years. So that is one. So I think overseas has been tougher. And bullying has many different dimensions, you can get bullied for how you look, you can get bullied for the lack of wealth that you come from, and I think you can get bullied for your accent. So, you stick out a lot more than you do. I mean, I went to Delhi public school for 4 years in India, and I have to say those were much easier years than my years overseas. So I think overseas is extremely tough. Of course, what I do see, and that wasn't a social media era, thank God. It's really tricky for young kids these days. I mean, I have a son, and people are so judgmental on social media sometimes about how someone looks. Like periodically, this happened to me once. Someone commented on my squint. Someone periodically does comment because I get photographed so much, write something. Now, of course, I have the confidence to take on the trolls. But so many women, in fact, women CEOs, women leaders, entrepreneurs, tell me they still get commented on their looks. And people are so judgmental about it. I mean, it makes no sense. Nobody looks perfect, and it doesn't matter. It's one dimension. People alone.
Correct.
But that's why I speak about it, right? Because people write back stories to me, and people have so many stories of either it's outright bullying or being judged, and the insecurity that comes with being judged.
Yeah, I know. And the more stories that get shared, the more confidence it builds in people that I'm not the only one. And there are people who have fought it, and there is a way to do it.
And then it's not necessary to go out there and look perfect.
Yeah, I know. You're beautiful in your own sense.
You're beautiful in your own way. So I remember in my early days, I used to be very conscious, because I would go, this was a few years ago, I would go to these events where, like, Western wear has become so prominent, right? And I would end up finishing my work day and go to these events in a sari, because that's what I like to wear. And I was like, oh God, and people would be looking. So now I flaunt the sari, right? Because there's a self-confidence that's come over time. In fact, I tweet about it and I talk about it, that it's okay, you're as cool in a skirt at work as you are in a sari.
Right. Absolutely. That's a very powerful line. But tell me that you said you were a good student as well. So why was it that you were not able to find a good job for yourself for some amount of time, which led to a mental breakdown within you?
Because success in a classroom, and we're not taught this enough in India, doesn't translate to success
In real world.
in
Yeah.
the interviewing world or in the real world. And this is a hard lesson that all of us. So interviews, I think, are about storytelling and self-confidence, which I clearly sucked at some point. And in fact, a few days ago, I had to give an interview for my son's school admission, like play school admission. And my husband's always been an amazing interviewer, and
Yeah.
so I was answering a lot of these questions, and he's like, "You interviewed really well," and he's like, "I'm amazed." I'm like, "Why are you amazed?" It's like, because I know what you were like 20 years ago. And I was like, well, 20 years of media training and doing this will obviously change someone. So interviews are about storytelling
Right.
and self-confidence. And that's not something that is, related to academic success. And of course, the workplace is about so many more dimensions. I think the workplace is about, of course, working hard, but about grabbing opportunities, working with people, managing people. So I think academic success does not translate over to these things.
Yeah, absolutely. But why did you have, just for the benefit of the audience, because there are so many people who face failures and have suicidal thoughts. How did you really overcome it and, get back on your feet and say that it's fine, I will bag the next job I get, and which you did?
I think maybe I'll give you this answer not in the context of that incident, but the last 20 years. See, I think rejection is normal. And the few pieces of advice, similar to some of the stuff I've shared in my book, but not all of it. One is, I think you need to have a lot more open conversation. So, if you look at a child, when a child falls, and my son is at that crawling stage, so I'm seeing a lot of it these days. You fall, you cry, you get upset. You need time to cry and vent out and heal, and you must absolutely do that. And then typically when he falls, like, I give him a big hug and I spend that 5-10 minutes with him, comforting him. And you need that hug, right? Even in the adult version, you need to talk, you need to have that conversation. So you need to get over the feelings, and you need to have that conversation and talk about it. And then you need to learn, and then you get up again. And I think the process that a child goes through is very similar to the process that we go through. So that, if you just fell and asked someone to get up again, it's hard. But that hug in the middle is very powerful. And I think being able to reach out to someone, to have a circle of advisors, mentors, friends, support system, who can tell you are not alone and talk you through it in a more logical way, saying that it's not a rejection of you, it's a rejection of an opportunity, and another one will come up. That helps.
So who was your support system back then?
So back then, actually, I did not. I think one of the reasons I struggled so much is, outside of my husband who was dating me, I didn't have a great support system. And it's not because they didn't exist, it's because I didn't talk to them.
Right. You need to be more open.
And you need to be. And because in colleges, there's a lot of fear about having conversation. Oh, I'm going to be judged. Oh, they all have such perfect lives. Oh, none of them has failed.
Correct. But I think that's changing a lot more now.
The awareness of mental health, I think, has gone up substantially in the last 5-7 years, especially post-COVID. So I hope there's a little more. So for all the judgment that there is on social media, there's also outreach, there's also empathy. I mean, I wish LinkedIn posts were what they are now. Some of the content that I see people of places in influence, I wish people were writing that kind of content now. It would be very, motivating.
But everything has its own
everything has its time, and
but tell me, do you remember your interview with McKinsey? Because that's where your career actually started from. Do you remember the kind of questions you were asked, and how did you answer them?
I mean, I have vague memories now, but I remember it was in Boston. I remember a lot of the conversation was about bridge. I don't remember very much. And I remember that the interviewer saw in me a little bit of real hunger to want this, because I had been through so much. Which is why I think she told me that I had the job right after the interview. Which is not something that people traditionally do. So I think she saw the hunger in my eyes. I also remember, and I'm someone who does a lot of interviewers now, a lot of empathy in that interview.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's very important. The ability to read someone's eyes, make someone feel comfortable,
Right.
and get them to talk about this dimension of their life
Yeah.
that they
yeah.
would not otherwise talk about. So I also saw a lot of empathy. And I
Understood.
think that's a very powerful thing.
Yeah, it's not just about you working with some company, it's also about understanding the person that
Yeah,
you
it's
will be
about
working
understanding the person. And I remember that interview being very warm and empathetic, and that's a great feeling to leave.
Yeah.
Interviews often give you a feeling of being judged. And I think good interviewers are people who let you talk, who let you share your story with empathy. When I interview, and as I said, I interview a lot, I typically open my interview with one question, and it's so simple. It's tell me about yourself. And my hope is the person will share the story. And you know what often ends up happening, because people know me a little bit on social media, or they would have researched,
Yeah.
those interviews, they start telling me so many things, and they're like, why am I telling you this? They start telling me about issues with their past organization, or like childhood issues. Like, so many things come out. And
Yeah.
I think interviews can be an open space.
Yeah, that's true. Even I interview a lot of people, and they're like, we didn't seem like we're meeting for the first time. You know, you made me open up so much that it's recorded now and you edit it, please.
So interviews should not be a judgmental place.
Yeah. And that also says that people don't remember what you said, but how you made them feel. That's what you remember from the interview. As
Yeah,
well.
you always remember the vibe. You don't remember the words.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So you remember the feeling.
Correct. And your husband has been a part of your journey in a very integrated way, right,
Yes.
since the beginning. So tell me about how did you happen to meet him, and how did you all get together?
So I met my husband on campus. He's a graduate of the same program. So that's how we met.
Yeah.
And we got married fairly young. We got married at 24, which is fairly young. In fact, interestingly, in my graduating class, a lot of you see a lot of couples have come out of from India. So I don't know what happened. But yes, and he also works in asset management in the same business. And it's an interesting ride. I think having someone who knows your business and your industry well, it has its disadvantages, but it has a lot of advantages. You know, because in times when markets are really bad, when someone needs to work an extra day at work or an extra few hours, you don't have to explain why.
Yeah.
So I think that there's just the knowledge of the same industry can be very helpful. And of course, now we are raising a son together.
Right. You said there are some disadvantages also. So which are some of those?
I think the disadvantage is there's no real break from the conversation at home. I mean, we don't do a particularly good job of separating office from work. So there's always a conversation, and that's just the way it is. And I mean, I think in any situation there are pros and cons, and if you spend, I mean, back to optimism, right? If you focus more on the pros, you know, it's all good.
Yeah. And you said that you got married at a fairly young age. Was it because of the family or your own choice?
It was just a choice, right? I mean, we've been dating since we were 21. Then, you know, family also says, I mean, get married. So, like, okay, get married. I mean, you know, it was not I think most of my decisions in life have not been so overthought.
Okay.
You know, you take it as it comes. Get married.
Been seamless.
Yeah.
Understood. And then at 25, you set up your own asset management company.
Yeah.
How did you take that bold risk of doing this? Because you don't see many people step up into an entrepreneurial journey at that age in this industry. So can you tell me, how did that thought come?
This is an industry where entrepreneurship happens much later.
Correct.
Because it's an industry where experience and vintage, I think, count a little bit more. As I said, it wasn't a thought. I don't know if I would have made that decision now. But it wasn't. The great thing about being 25 is you don't think so much, right? And so there was a belief that India was growing. You know, as someone living overseas, you were seeing India of the 2003, 4, 5, when this whole BRICS movement had happened, when India as an economy, when India as a professional destination was really emerging. So there was a wish to move back to India and start up something. I always say with me, there's a kida, because my father moved every 3-4 years to keep doing something new. and there was a belief that you could come back and do it, and also a belief that if you failed, you could go back and get an MBA. So I think I like to take risks, but they are calculated risks. And so in that sense, it was calculated, and that's how we moved back to India.
Yeah, and then can you tell us how you set it up, the business, and if you were to do it today, which is setting it up from scratch, would you change anything in the way
I change so many things. See, when we were 25, we were 3 investment professionals with no customer experience. And today, if I had to set up an asset management business, I'm someone with 17, 18 years of experience and also time spent with customers, because I believe truly at the core of any business are the customers. And you know, today I would be a lot more focused on finding opportunities that customers really want. It took us, I guess product market fit is a very popular word, but it took us many years to get that right. So we set up the legal structures, we set up the operating structures, we set the platform, but it took a lot of time to get this right. And today I would start there. Today the only question I would ask myself is there a consumer problem that I can solve that other people are not solving, and also make money on it, because I believe business has to be sustainable finally. So that would be the only question I would ask.
So which were some of your big wins back then at 25 when you said
Oh God, at that point, like every small thing seemed like a big win. You know, getting our SEBI license in 3-4 weeks when we had just moved back to India seemed like a big win. Getting our first non-family and friend customer was a gentleman in Thane, and he's passed away, God bless him. Getting our first non-family customer who actually found us off an article I had written of money control was amazing. I mean, because it was a belief that finally you have your first customer who is not a family or friend or reference, who just came. Showing up on TV for the first time to market the business was a big win. Getting our first wealth manager to start selling our products. So all being the first registered hedge fund in India, each of these were wins. And I think in a startup context, you know, life is so difficult that you need small wins to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. We all speak of successes, but tell me sometimes of failures also, where you had most challenging times while running this business.
Oh God, I think like most of the days you ask yourself, what am I doing? I think the fact that, you know, you would go to customers and they would say, okay. So we came with the assumption that, you know, if you carry high academic pedigree, everyone will be rushing to invest. And just the constant no, I think is the worst. You know, I think there are 2 kinds of challenges. One is just the day-to-day operations of running a business with very little experience and very little money. So not being able to afford a lawyer, not being able to afford an accountant. I did the tally entries the first year, right? So just running. So there's that challenge. But I think the real painful one is, you know, when you go in and say, oh, I'm going to get this customer. I killed it at this pitch, and then not working. I think that is the toughest kind of rejection.
And do you remember your most interesting pitch that you made to a client?
Oh God. Well, I think this Thane one was really interesting because this was a customer who had never invested in financial instruments outside of FDs, etc. And as I said, he found us off an article on money control, and he came from Thane to meet us. He said, because you're, you know, a lady, why don't I come to your office? And he walked into our office and met us, and it took us kind of months to convince him and work through that, but we finally did. So, and you know, remained a customer for a very long time, I think even till today. So that was a great journey.
Oh, he's there till today?
Yeah.
Oh wow, that speaks in itself.
That's a great journey.
Yeah, but you had no experience at all of investing business, especially in this space. So how would you keep yourself updated with what's happening and deal with that kind of pressure that you still have to learn and perform at the same time?
So I think, you know, I had experience of investing, of course not of running the business. I think you learn, and that has been the case in a large part of my career. I mean, I think I joined mutual fund with virtually zero experience. I think you learn by exploring. So you go out, and in any profession, by the way, it's not just as a business owner. India is changing, and markets and opportunities are changing so dynamically that if you stop learning, I mean, it is truly a dead end.
Yeah.
So I think you learn by exploring. I mean, right now I'm kicking off a new project in the context of Edelweiss Mutual Fund, and it's a space that is alien to me, right? The way I'm going to learn it is by going out and meeting lots of people, and I'm going to ask a lot of questions. I'm not going to make assumptions, and I'm just going to go out and meet people. I'm going to read, but I'm going to talk, and thankfully, you always have access to people.
Yeah.
So I'm going to learn, and I'm going to meet as many people. It's the same thing we did in the Forefront Capital days. You learn by meeting and talking and spending time on the ground. I think that is the best way to learn.
Yeah. And did you ever not have this feeling that you are a bit inexperienced, or will this take off? Did you have that fear ever that what if it doesn't take off? How will we work it out? Because when you see your peers of your same age doing very good in their own career trajectory and you're doing something else completely different, how do you cope up with that?
So that feeling, I think, in the context of entrepreneurship, in the context of this business, because it's also been a startup in a larger context, has always been there. And to some extent, that insecurity is tough. That insecurity is also good, because I think it pushes you very hard. That will this take off? I think some of the reason that startups have the energy that sometimes larger corporate houses don't is there isn't that sense of comfort.
Right.
So this feeling that, this is not going to take off. Did I make the right decision? Oh, I don't even have a car when everybody else has X, Y, Z. That is very natural.
But you felt okay with it?
No, I wouldn't say you felt okay with it. I'm saying you have to get over that feeling. So you wake up one day with that feeling.
Yeah.
Then something good happens at work. And you're like, okay, I can fight another day. And you have something bad that happens, and you have that feeling again and again. So I think it's a little bit of a roller coaster, but unlike a roller coaster which is flat, thankfully it trends up in some way.
Yeah, understood. And how did the opportunity of Edelweiss come in? I'm sure it's there in the public. Just for our viewers would want to know.
I joined Edelweiss Group when we decided to sell Forefront.
But why did you decide to sell it off and not run it?
We felt a larger financial services platform would add scale to the business. And I think selling anything is a very personal decision. People, and we took a lot of time. Selling in financial services is not like selling a tech business, because it is more of a partnership. The team often continues with the employer. So it's not only about finding the right price, it's truly about finding the right fit. And that's why we spend 9 months talking to people. And I think the fact that many years after the acquisition we're still here and still here says that perhaps it was a very well thought out decision. So that's how Edelweiss came up. Edelweiss Mutual Fund is interesting because that came up in 2016, a few years after we had sold the business. I was getting a little impatient of saying, I want to do more, etc., etc. And at that point, Edelweiss had decided to sort of step up the energy on the mutual fund business. And we were acquiring JP Morgan India's mutual fund business. And I got the opportunity to run that merger. I was talking to a colleague yesterday. And I think I put my lifeblood into this merger. I mean, really talking to every person, just making sure that this went through. And I wasn't promised anything at the end of it. I just thought of it as an opportunity to learn and do something different. And after that, the whole CEO thing happened.
It also shows that when you go out there without any expectations, that's when you get the greatest
results. So when you go out there without expectations, and without, what will this give me, but just the opportunity to learn. You get great opportunities ahead of you.
Right. And how are you viewing your next 5 years? I know 10 years is a lot.
10 years is a long time. I think super exciting. I have always been optimistic about the mutual fund business because I think we sell a great financial product that is so highly regulated at as little as 500 rupees. It's incredible. And I think the stage at which India is at, most industries are underpenetrated. Mutual funds are one more example.
Yeah.
Mutual fund AUM or assets to GDP in India is 16%, and the global average is 40%. So we have so much room to go. Younger consumers are entering the market. More women investors, for instance, are entering the market. And I think if you have a solid consumer proposition, the company will grow. So we've grown as a business from 6,000 to almost 1,06,000 crores today in the last 5 years. But I truly believe that we will see 2 lakh and 5 lakh crores, and we will see an explosion of customers. We just need to keep focused, be a little long term about this business, and find ways to solve consumer problems, investment problems.
Yeah, that's right. And you also mentioned that you were the only sari in a boardroom full of suits. So how did that experience go for you? Were you having an incident ever where you were mansplained, or where your voice wasn't heard, or you felt that some unconscious gender bias has been taking place on the table?
So it happens till date, and it happens to a lot of people. I mean, and I don't think some of it is man woman, but some of it is also about being the minority in the room. If you have 20 people from one state and one guy from another state, even if they're all of the same gender, chances are some sense of discomfort will happen. Now, some of it is external, it comes from people and things like you said. Some of it is also internal lack of self-confidence and you not speaking up in a room because you're scared of the other 20 people. So what I have learned over time is, I think it was much harder 4-5 years ago. Now, if the first happens and if I see bias or if I see I'm being excluded, I consciously raise my hand and say, guys, I'm not being listened to. And I can do that now. That comes with time, some amount of confidence, and also I think a little bit of success over the last 3-4 years, at least, I mean, I always still say it's early days. Some success over the last 3-4 years also makes people look at you a little differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And success changes you also as a person.
It gives you self-confidence. You know that, gender, etc. I mean, these things don't hold you back. So I think, and I truly believe that when you carry yourself with confidence, and I think that is the defining message of my book, is that when you carry yourself with confidence, the world sees you that way.
Yeah. But this is about workplace. Did you ever have the gender bias also when you were...
certainly not in the workplace. So I think this organization has been really easy. Externally, it's a little more challenging. So you meet clients who behave in a funny way. You meet vendors or partners who meet peers and colleagues who make assumptions. So I think the internal, this has been a very safe environment, I have to say. The external environment, I think, has been a little tougher. My issues are also a little unique because it's a combination of gender and age. I think now I've been CEO for 6 years. I was 33 when I started, right? So I was a very young CEO. People don't see a mutual fund CEO at 33. So they don't, and even that I think is going to change now. They don't know what to make of you. Young girl mutual fund CEO at 33 who's not come from industry, people don't know what to do with you.
But it's so difficult to find your place within. But if you do, I mean, success is actually limitless.
It truly is. And I think a few years ago when I became vice chairman of AMFI, which is the Mutual Fund Association, I was like, okay, I think I'm finally comfortable here.
Did you find enough women in the room there or no?
No. Unfortunately, we're still one mutual fund female CEO. We're longer to go on that.
But is there a reason why most of the women don't choose to be in this field? Or why would
I have not figured it out. We are 30% women in this organization, including a female CEO, Chief Operating Officer, Chief Risk Officer, Chief Brand Officer, by the way. All 4 of us have become mothers in the last few years. So while with us, so we're also young women, and so we're going through that journey as well. I don't know why. I think asset management and financial services in general offers a wonderful career opportunity to women, and I keep telling women to please explore this as a career.
I know. I think it's in the mind only that, it's so difficult.
It's really in the mind. I think it's a great career.
Right. And now that you are a parent, how did you take a decision of being a parent, because it's sometimes so challenging to manage work and family. Very few people can do it well, and since you've aced it, I would say, in my way, how was that decision made for you?
Well, I'm very young into it. I'm only 10 months into it, so it's too early to write a report card on my parenting and balance. Look, I think parenting, I mean, we always wanted to have children. Now, having children, I think, is a very personal choice when you do it. I don't think there's a formula. I had kids very late. I mean, just a year ago, right? So by any metric, I think having a kid at 38, 39 is very late. That was my choice. I think it was a function. I had a couple of miscarriages. I know, by the way, conceiving has become increasingly difficult for women. And again, it's an issue that is not talked about, which is why I talk about it. When I became CEO and I got super busy, I finally had a child last year. And I have to say, even though I wanted it, I struggled with the idea then. I was like, how is this going to work? And you don't see too many sitting examples where women, because I've had kids late, where women are CEOs and new mothers. They've usually done that phase by the time they become CEOs. So they have kids who are a lot older. And I was like, how is this going to work? Or they're entrepreneurs where they have a little more control over their schedule than I do. Thankfully, I've got a lot of work support. And I've learned that you have to, Zia Modi gave me this advice, you have to have a really good support system at home. And between that and a little planning, it works. Now, I can't get up. If you tell me go to Bangalore today, I can't do it easily. But if you tell me you have to go to Bangalore in 2 weeks or in a week, I will figure it out. So I'm able to do everything. But with a lot more planning and support system. It's like I run a mini office at home.
And I was watching Kiran Bedi's interview. She was also saying that I became a parent because that was my choice. And it was my choice to work as well. So I'm not guilty at all for...
No, I write this a lot. I think, if you had twin children, no one would ask you which one you love more, right? So you have to see your career as a child that you've invested 18 years, in my case, with. And you have to see your child as a child who's new, and you have to manage both of them, and you love both of them equally. And they both give you joy. Sometimes you'll have a really tough day at work and you'll go home and see a smiling 10-month-old who's like gurgling over nothing. And it gives you a lot of happiness. And sometimes the home front will be challenging and you'll come to work and you'll find some really cool project and that will give you happiness, and that is life.
The one common thing that I hear about your story throughout is resilience, at every phase of your life. So has there been anyone whom you've looked up to, whom you've really followed for the qualities that they have, or the leadership style that they possess, and the balance that they have in their life? That there could be many people, there could be one.
I think my influences have come from home. I think my parents are incredibly resilient people, and I've seen both of them, as we've moved countries, bring us up in little means with a lot of optimism. See, my father came from a background where he went to a Hindi medium school, was born at home in a small district called Gango, and cracked the civil services exam. And someone gifted my son a study table when he was 5 months old and couldn't sit. And my father was like, I had to fight and become a professor to earn a study table so I could enroll in coaching classes for the IAS and then finally take the exam. And my grandson has a study table before he can even sit. So I've seen a lot of influences at home. And the reason I talk about this when you say this is, I believe a lot of role models come from home and we don't credit them. So we have a lot of external role models, but truly a lot of influences come from the role models at home.
Because you've spent so many years and so much of time with them.
I mean, I see my mother, right? She's a full-time principal of a school, and I was staying with her for a month during COVID. And here she is finding time to cook 3 different meals for my father, me, because I was visiting and I was early pregnancy at that time, and my brother, while managing the full-time chaos of a school and a house and everything. So you see this at home.
And after all of this, do you believe in the power of destiny at all?
I do, and I believe It's a mix. So I do believe that you have the ability to write your own, to shape your destiny. Um, Perhaps not control over it, but I also do believe that you have the ability to shape your own destiny. And I also believe that the world in some way conspires for you to succeed. So you don't understand how things fit together, but they do.
Yeah. And have you had any mentors apart from the home?
Oh, many, many.
Can you name a few of them?
I won't name, but I haven't had
Anything you've learned from them?
Oh, many things, God, so many things. I have an ex-boss who actually just called me a few days ago, who I've learned so much about managing people from. He guided me through my whole phase when the JP Morgan merger was happening, and he was so kind, and he would sit with me sometimes and be having his lunch and just talk me through his experiences and struggles managing people.
Yeah.
So my framework is a little different. Rather than a single mentor, there are lots of people who I respect for different things, and I go to them for advice on that particular aspect of life.
So did you ever feel like you have to be a little more masculine to be in this kind of an industry, being a woman? Or it's not about the gender, it's more about the qualities of a feminine and a masculine?
No, in fact, I think, and I don't like to generalize, and I think I had given a talk on this. I think today the feminine skill sets of empathy, compassion are more relevant than they ever were. Empathy towards your customers, empathy towards your people. I think resourcefulness, multitasking, if these are feminine skill sets, I believe they are far more relevant.
Yeah.
And I finally believe that every individual has to take the best of them into the boardroom or the war room or the battlefield or whatever they're in. And you have to find the best of your qualities and take them out.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll come to the rapid fire round, which is the last segment. Starting off with, what was your leadership style back then at Forefront Capital, and how has it evolved into what is it now?
There was no leadership style, very honest, because I didn't manage a large number of people.
Yeah.
I think today my leadership style, it's hard to label it, but it's individual. I try not to take leadership too seriously in terms of my conduct with people. The responsibility is a very big one. The privilege is a very big one, but the conduct with people is easy. So I want to say easy and accessible.
Understood. And what are the top 3 qualities that you look at in people when you hire them in your team?
Hunger is number 1. Hunger and ambition. Agility is extremely important.
Yeah.
And some sense of humility.
Right. No technicals apart from the technical.
I mean, people will have technical skills. You have to meet the technical bar.
Correct. What?
But beyond the point, I mean, we're not doing rocket science.
Yeah. What's your favorite childhood memory?
Going on vacations with my parents.
Yeah.
Going on vacations with them.
Vacation was anyways there for you.
Yeah. No, I mean, but even within these countries, like going to random little places on vacations, I think it's been my best memory.
Yeah. And any alternate career path for you? If it was, how would it look
I
like?
had a phase where I wanted to be a lawyer. I keep telling my son, even though he's 10 months old, that he should be a lawyer. I even took the legal exam. So I had a lawyer phase.
And what's your parenting formula now? I mean, every parent wants their children to grow into somebody as a person. So what is it for you, for your son?
I just want him to have gratitude, because I got a lot more than my father did, and my father got a lot more than his previous generation did. And my son has been born into so much more than I did or my father did. So I want him to have gratitude for the family he comes from, the opportunities he will have as our son, and the opportunities he will have because he grows up in India of this generation, not my father's generation. And if he has gratitude, believe me, he will make the most out of those opportunities. So that's what I want.
Right. Also, SEBI introduced a rule for social media influencers, because they go a lot about speaking on the mutual fund industry. So what's your take on the creators who are coming into the space and educating their influencers with the knowledge they impart?
Do it responsibly and do it with full disclosure. You're not selling toothpaste here with no disregard to toothpaste. You're advising people on their money, and money is hard earned. So do it disclosing all the reasons for what you're doing it, and do it with a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
Genuinely.
And what's one word for success for you now?
Impact, as I said. Impact and
Yeah.
influence.
Okay. And lastly, what's the last thing you did for the first time?
It's the last thing I did for the first time. I guess with my kid, I'm doing a lot of things for the first time. Like, I'm crawling on the floor for the first time to make him crawl. So I have a lot of firsts going on.
Yeah.
It probably was the first, the last thing I did for the first time. I've crawled after a really long time.
That's quite.
It's not very comfortable.
Yeah, but on that lighter note, I thank you for your time and sharing
you.
so many of your insights, both on the humorous side and on the impact side. I had a great time with you, and hope your book Limitless reaches to many, many people.
Thank you, Radhika.